And I'm so glad I wasn't on announcements today. Well done. So welcome everybody first, and thank you to the worship team. Thank you, Danica. Thank you for everybody. I'm glad to see a nice crowd in here. I'm glad we're in here, so it does seem like a crowd, because it would be very sparse and few between if we were in the main auditorium still. So today, I would like to talk to you about a very, very easy topic: the compatibility of faith and science. So some of you may know that my first degree is in chemistry, so that's considered a physical science. And in university, for sure, I had friends that were Christian, friends that weren't, and certainly in my science community, a lot of friends that didn't understand how I could be a Christian. Now, as a scientist, one reason I went into science was because I question everything. Just ask my Sunday school teachers. And this is actually quite biblical. So we need to understand, when the Bible talks about us as a flock, it does not mean that we are sheep blindly following without thought. We are not lemmings running off a cliff, right? The Bible is clear about this. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says, "But test everything that is said. Hold on to what is good." And in Acts 17:11 and 12, it says, "Now the brethren Jews were of more noble character than those of Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness, and they examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true." So not just blindly accepting everything, but looking, thinking, testing. So there is a show out there called Young Sheldon, and it has some Christian aspects to it, although it's not an overly Christian show. Sheldon is a genius, I'll say, and later on then he becomes a professor in the Big Bang Theory. But I'd like to show you an excerpt from the show Young Sheldon.
Can I sit with you?
I think Mommy needs to be alone right now.
All right. Mom, I'm scared.
Why?
You didn't go to church. You stopped saying grace. I don't understand what's going on.
It's kind of hard to explain.
Is it me? Did I do something wrong?
Of course not. Come here. Sheldon. Faith means believing in something you can't know for sure is real. And right now, I am struggling with that.
So you don't believe in God anymore?
That isn't something for you to worry about. I need to figure this out myself.
Can I help? Maybe I could provide a fresh perspective.
I don't think so, baby.
Did you know that if gravity were slightly more powerful, the universe would collapse into a ball?
I did not.
Also, if gravity were slightly less powerful, the universe would fly apart and there'd be no stars or planets.
Where are you going with this, Sheldon?
It's just that gravity is precisely as strong as it needs to be. And if the ratio of the electromagnetic force to the strong force wasn't 1%, life wouldn't exist. What are the odds that would happen all by itself?
Why are you trying to convince me to believe in God? You don't believe in God.
I don't, but the precision of the universe at least makes it logical to conclude there's a creator.
Baby, I appreciate what you're trying to do. But logic is here, and my problem is here.
Well, There are 5 billion people on this planet, and you're the perfect mom for me. What are the odds of that?
Thank you, Lord, for this little boy.
I knew I could fix it.
Maybe it was you and the Lord.
I don't like sharing credit, but I knew in that moment it wasn't the appropriate.
Okay, so if you don't know that show, you can guess that his mother was a devout Christian. And as the young genius, he was always questioning. And you saw there what happened. Now, his mother says faith means believing is something that you can't know for sure is real. And the Oxford Dictionary would tell us that faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something, or strong belief in doctrines of the religion based on spiritual conviction rather than truth. Now, when I talk about faith, I follow the first more than the second, because I don't understand why Christians have to have spiritual conviction to say that we believe in Jesus, that we believe that he died to atone for our sins, when we have read many historical documents that he existed. He performed miracles. He outwitted religious zealots with their own doctrine. He died on the cross, and he was reborn. But historians, they only need to have complete confidence of that an event happened thousands of years ago because they have, again, multiple sources, like we have. So maybe some of you have heard that I often say, I don't believe, I know. Now maybe that's just semantics, but occasionally it does work well at the right time to make that very strong statement to somebody that might want to debate me. Because I'm happy to talk about my faith. I love to discuss it, but I don't debate it. Now, at least one person I'll say has brought up Hebrews to me. And that's Hebrews 11:1, that says, now faith is being sure of what we hope for, being convinced of what we do not see. But to me, I don't see this as a definition of faith, but more what faith does for us. So the direction I really wanted to go today is a little bit different, but for the video, I want you to realize how many scientific things there are out there, how many ideas, how many facts, how many calculations have to be exactly perfect for God's earth to exist, right? Because he could have made it and then it all was gone the next day, right? No, that's not what happened, obviously. But in my short life, well, not that short, but in my short life, I've experienced that there are fundamental scientists out there that spend their time trying to disprove religion. And I've also met fundamental believers out there that spend their time trying to discredit science. And it doesn't make sense to me. So in my understanding, science is actually agnostic, neither believing or unbelieving. Science does not assess or deny the existence of God. It's the scientists themselves that may or may not believe, which is, of course, a personal decision. I also believe that the faithful need to view science as a way to understand how the world that God created works. So science is just a tool. Now, like most tools, it could be used for good, but it can also be used for evil. So as Christians, we should simply help guide science in the direction that it needs to go to help us explain this wonderful world. Now, one Christian leader you've probably heard of, Charles Wesley, seemed to agree, as in a hymn that he wrote for the First Methodist School. The hymn was called Come, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. He writes, "Unite the pair, so long disjoined, knowledge and vital piety, learning and holiness combined, and truth and love that all shall see." So following up on the point that we don't need to avoid or resist science, it may be that we need to review our interpretation of the word. So we may also need to understand that traditions are traditions. If they're not based in the word, they are only traditions. And they might not be biblical. One of the earlier conflicts between science and religion occurred in about 1500 AD. There was a man named Nicholas Copernicus. He was a scientist, a religious leader, and he concluded that the sun, not the earth, was the center of the universe, and that the earth rotated around the sun. Now, the church traditionally translated or interpreted Psalm 104:5. He set the earth on its foundations, it will never move. They interpreted this to say that the earth can never move. Now, we currently certainly believe, I know, that the earth has both rotational and revolutional movements. It does move, yet our faith is not tumbling down around us. And besides that, we should realize that it was the teachings in Greek philosophy that held that the sun revolved around the earth, not the other way around. This was not the teaching of the Bible. So we need to be careful where we get our knowledge. Now, Copernicus actually kept these findings for the most part secret because he feared the church. A few decades later, about 3 decades later, a guy named Galileo, you've probably heard of him, also a known Christian, came up with the same scientific findings, but he was quite a bit louder about them. And this met the ire of both the Pope and many professors who came out very strongly against him and even wanted him jailed. Now, he did have some supporters as well in the church and in the universities. One friend of his, Johannes Kepler, in a letter wrote, Johannes was a mathematician, an astronomer, and a Christian leader. And he wrote in a letter that, "I wanted to be a theologian, and for a long time I was unhappy because I was not. But now behold, God is praised by my work, even in astronomy." So when we can use the works of science to explain how God's earth works, how his universe works, then this is a great thing. This is a wonderful thing. In Isaiah 40:22, I want to point out that the Bible does point us out of the spherical shape of the earth. He sits enthroned upon the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. So if there's any flat earthers out there today, circle. Now, I've come up with a couple of go-to arguments that are often brought up to me from other scientists. You might call them elephants in the room. You want to go to pop cultures, you can say, well, when haters want to hate, there's a couple of these. One of them being miracles. So scientists like myself, we want to observe, record, repeat, observe, record, and when we can record the same thing or similar and explain differences, then we call this, okay, fact or theory. Now, miracles don't really have the ability to be repeated and recorded quite so easily. But we Christians know that many, many miracles in the Bible did actually happen. You can all list many, right? I mean, parting of the Red Sea, the virgin birth, curing of leprosy, the healing of the blind, the raising of Lazarus, the resurrection, of course. But how can these be explained by science? Well, the answer is they really can't be explained by science. So I have a couple of different arguments with my friends or colleagues on these, and I'll impart those on you, and you can use them later. So first I'd like to ask, well, like I explained before with historians, why do we need to prove today that something happened thousands of years ago when they're well documented, right? William Lane Craig, who is a PhD who's written for the Journal of American Scientific Affiliation and many other publications, openly talks about how the virgin birth was very difficult, a sticking point even for him when he was a teenager. He was a Christian, but he was also knew he was going to be a scientist. He had scientific thought and couldn't get past this point. For he knew that Mary didn't have a Y chromosome. And she didn't have the genetic material to produce a baby boy. So how could he scientifically explain this? But further in his faith, he explains, when he thought a little bit more about it, well, if God can create the universe, he can probably create a Y chromosome. So why is this a sticking point? When we believe in miracles, we believe. And I said I look at it two ways. So the other way is I simply document miracles today that can't be scientifically explained. Now, just 10 seconds on the internet brought up a few that we see here. I'm not going to read through all of them, but they all are well documented by multiple sources, by multiple witnesses that have happened just in the last years. And if a scientist can't explain these that happened recently, why do we need to explain how a miracle happened thousands of years ago? Because for sure, they have to admit that these did happen. So, do scientists ever believe in something they can't see, something they can't prove? Well, the answer is yes. And we call these theories. And many things are taken for granted today, are actually still labeled as theories, as they know modifications, changes, adaptations are actually required to make them work in our world today, in God's world today. Things like theory of relativity, theory of gravity. Yes, gravity is still a theory. Theory of evolution, to name a few. Now, the last one is another of these topics that are always brought up, the theory of evolution. Creation versus evolution, or more specifically, macroevolution. The word theory is very important here. It is the theory of macroevolution, not the law of macroevolution. Darwin's theory is that through randomness, descent with modification occurs, giving rise to new species. Now, my favorite way to summarize this was once famously done with the words, "From goo to you by way of the zoo." Doesn't make much sense to me. Now, the theory that random combination works towards more complex species actually goes against the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics is a physical law that describes the behavior of energy in natural processes. It introduces the concept of entropy, which is a measure of disorder or randomness in a system. And the law states that entropy of a system never decreases. Never decreases. Now make note that this is a law of science. And it is in direct conflict with the theory of evolution. But if you don't want to cross physical science and life science, then I'll come up with another explanation on how you can argument against it. When Charles Darwin introduced the theory of evolution, it was expected that the fossil record would provide evidence of a gradual development supporting the idea of species transformation from one form to another form. However, the fossil record still does not align with this expectation. Instead, it reveals what's known as the Cambrian explosion. And the Cambrian explosion is a term that refers to the rapid emergence of complex life forms in the Cambrian period. It was characterized by the appearance of many major animal phyla that make up modern life. Now, a sudden appearance of fully formed animal life with no preceding fossil ancestors. So this discrepancy poses major challenges for evolutionists. The lack of gradual development of fossil records contradicts the notion of continuous transition between species. In an article by geophysicist Stephen C. Myers a few decades ago, he highlights that the growing skepticism among biologists since the 70s regarding the inaccuracy of Darwin's theory in explaining evolution. While genetics can account for the microevolutionary changes in gene frequency within a population, they are not seen as being able to turn a reptile into a mammal or a fish into an amphibian. So this is a scientist, also a Christian, but really bringing out that there is a lot, maybe not as boisterous as they should be, but a lot of scientists out there that understand that the theory of evolution has gaps so wide that you could part the Red Sea through. Now, there is something called microevolution, which we see in the breeding of animals, we see in survival of the fittest, but this is microevolution. This is not macroevolution. So the fossil record does not support expected gradual development of species proposed by Darwin's theory of evolution. This sudden appearance of fully formed animal life during the Cambrian explosion raises immense questions as to the adequacy of evolutionary changes to account for the emergence of new and diverse organisms. When we look at Darwin's theory, we should think about, well, how old is it? It was published in 1859. How many scientific theories from 1859 are still being taught in school exactly like that? Not so many. Now, in 1859, the world was a little different. It wasn't for 10 years later that DNA was even discovered. It wasn't for 70 years after that that DNA was realized to be the genetic information within cells. That was 80 years ago. And in the last 80 years, science has learned so much about DNA and cells and how it is the genetic programming for us so much that I would say that it could be very well that Darwin, when he understands the science that we understand today, would not support his own theory. Perhaps he would more listen to David in Psalms 19, 1 and 2. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where the voice is not heard. Now, the truth is, throughout history, there have been remarkable individuals of faith who played a significant role in shaping modern scientific thinking. These great men recognized that at the very heart of the universe resides a divine intelligence. Contrary to the prevailing beliefs of their time or their friends, they understood that life is not a product of random chance, cannot be. This is chaos, but it rather operates within a rational and ordered framework. They challenge the notion that the world is subject to the capricious whims of numerous deities, instead asserting that there is one benevolent God. And to truly know this God is to attain a deep understanding of the truth. These visionary scientists and thinkers also recognize that the universe is not a haphazard creation, but one infused with design and purpose, reflecting the wisdom and intentionality of the Creator. Now, not to go back to TV shows, but the truth is out there. We only need to open our eyes to study the beauty and the complexity around us. Paul said in Romans 1, 20 and 21, since the creation of God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuses. Now, this is today as relevant as when Paul wrote it. The more we learn about the complexity of the world, the more reason there is to believe, no, not believe, know that God exists and that he created the universe on purpose. And if you have any debate about that, I'm not interested. If you'd like to discuss it, I am always here. Thank you. Worship team.